So welcome everybody. Thank you for joining this Bohan webinar. This one is entitled The Urban Banyan Tree, Inspiration from Flourishing Third Spaces. And I'm delighted, more than delighted actually, to have four ladies who are at the top of their game, contributing to exactly that, a forest of urban banyan trees right here in London. Before introducing our amazing speakers, let me say a few words about the title. We at Bohan chose our name because it includes exactly the fusion of people and place that we're intent on delivering for our members. Bohemians are the free-thinking people who thrive in a community of equals that they can bounce off. And they're just the sort of people who are looking for co-working in the post-COVID hybrid world of work. That's the Bo, B-O-H in our name, and the banyan tree is the An. It's the focal point of village life in many parts of Asia where they have banyan trees. And South London itself is really just a collection of former Surrey towns and villages. And they too are in need of focal points and creative spaces and project spaces and desk spaces and conference spaces where finally we can get together again. And that brings us to our panelists. So first off, we have Josie Baum. Josie is COO of ARC Club, responsible for the internal operations of the company and the site operations of their spaces. Josie joined ARC Club after running a social enterprise and built environment consultancy, New Normal Collective, for 6 years. At NNC Co, she advised not-for-profits, county councils, FTSE 100 companies, and independent workspace providers on how to develop places that drive commercial return and local impact across the UK. And she brings this experience to ARC Club to help the business expand to further sites in a socially impactful and commercially sustainable way. Telixia Inico, who's a spoken word artist, public speaker and founder of LDN, or London Creates, a creative hub and co-working space based in Croydon. Telixia has made a name for herself in the creative industry by working with the likes of Apple, an international coffee brand, Julius Meinl, as well as featuring on some of the UK's most high-profile music projects, like Cadet's posthumous album, Bouncer Play Dirty's mixtape, and performing live at the Bouncer versus Arms Wicked and Bad pay-per-view fight. Now, I was there. I got knocked out in the first round, so I'm not going to do that again. Her creative career led her to build the #1 creative hub and co-working space in Croydon, which has supported the likes of international DJ Manny Norte, rap royalty, Snap Capone, BBC extra presenter, Remy Bergs, and influencer Queen Mojo, amongst other content creators, musicians, and entrepreneurs. Monika. So Monika I've known for a while. Monika works for Nexudus, which is an awesome co-working supporting platform. Nexudus was created as a solution for co-working spaces for almost 10 years ago when the co-founders fell in love with the concept. And Monika has been part of the Nexudus team and the industry for nearly 4 years. And during that time, she's had a chance to speak to hundreds of operators and has seen the industry from behind the scenes. Claire Selby is Enterprise Projects Lead at Kingston University, where she leads Studio KT1, a creative agency inside the university which aims to increase student employability and encourage collaboration between disciplines and develop new products and services. And she's over 12 years of experience working in the education sector, running commercial projects, events, and training. And her specialism is listening to what industry needs from its students and graduates, solving their challenges creatively, and getting them credited and rewarded for their work. Most recently, Claire has worked with Kingston students to open Not My Beautiful House, transforming an old PC world in 6 weeks to become a creative meanwhile space, following the successful crowdfunder from the Mayor of London's Make London programme and support from the local council, the Royal Borough of Kingston. The branding, the interiors, and the furniture for the space have all been designed by students. Over 35 have been paid for their hard work on the project, and 4 are employed part-time to run the project. And in its first few months, Not My Beautiful House has welcomed 7,000 visitors with an average spend of £24 each, bucking the retail trends. Fiercely determined, she is to get students in places that they wouldn't normally be and recognised and rewarded for their work. And she's worked with an expansive client list, including Barclays, Samsung, Kingston First, Marks & Spencer, Deloitte, Wrangler, and Unilever. Really big names indeed. So we do have a stellar lineup. So enough of me talking. I'm now going to invite Josie, our first speaker, to say her piece. Josie, over to you.
Well, hi, and thanks for having me and for having ARC Club, which I'm representing. And hello to all the other fellow panelists who I am very pleased to be on with. Really, I've got 3 points to make. One is about the confluence of, I think, 3 things that have happened really for a number of years now, and obviously those have all sped up in the last 2, that's led to a bit of a perfect storm for co-working and for the role co-working can play in neighbourhoods. And then I'll talk a tiny bit about ARC Club's model, because that's who I work for and represent, but also I think I joined ARC Club because I really believe in the way we're doing it. So I guess the three things that drew me to working in co-working in the first place was firstly the negative reality of a loss of public space, and by public space I really mean things with walls that don't cost money or have assumptions on your right to go into them. Public libraries are the purest form of that, in my view, but there are many other places where people have the right to go into, both emotionally, they give themselves the right, or they practically have the actual right. And those places are falling by the wayside. That's not new news. So community centres, pubs in some ways, family centres, public libraries, those have just been depleting for years and years and years for the reasons that it's not needing to be explained really. But that has huge impact on individuals, families, community members, in being able to connect, feel part of something bigger than themselves, and more practically have access to resources they need to sustain a living, to sustain a happy family, to achieve their goals and to fulfill their kind of talents. So that's the first thing that's been going on for years. And one of the outcomes of that is all the things I said, but then there's this crazy reality of, alongside that, a huge rise in vacancy of real estate. So you have these empty spaces on high streets because of the changing way we shop, because of the changing way we work, which we'll move on to. But there's just an increasing amount of vacancy in neighbourhoods, and that also has emotional impacts and practical impacts on individuals and community members and families, and businesses through the loss of aspiration that you can feel for having these vacant sites in your neighbourhoods, for the sense of powerlessness you might have for not being able to use those sites when you probably have a number of ways you could be, and loads of other things. But there's this dearth of spaces that could be lively, could be bringing energy, could be providing purpose and opportunity for anybody and everybody, and they're just not, because of the structural way that real estate is owned and operated in this country and most places around the world that have a capitalist system. But I'm not here to talk about that. And then the third thing that's the positive is the change in how we work. You know, we're all working in different ways. Remote working is now possible for a number of sectors and a number of jobs. Not for all, but it is a big shift in how people can be productive outside of traditional spaces. And they have a bit more control over where they might do their work or how they might do that work. And obviously, I think that used to be, it was never that, it's become less and less niche, and it's blown into being mainstream in the last 2 years for the dreaded C reason. And that, I think, provides this amazing, new, powerful flow of resource and energy and money and spending that can go towards these physical spaces and to these communities, away from commercial real estate and into less traditional workspace environments. So for me, co-working is this perfect business model, financially sustainable model for bringing life back to these spaces and back to these communities. And so that's, for the last 10 years, co-working has been interesting to me because it's a commercially sustainable way of kind of bringing life back to fragmented space. And then ARC, not to plug it, but slightly to plug it. But the reason I'm at ARC, and I love ARC, is because we take over those sorts of spaces that have been vacant for a number of years, or are looking for ways to change what a high street or a corner shop type use of a space can be for neighbourhoods. And we do it in a way that is extremely cheap. We don't spend very much money in taking over those sites. We don't spend a huge amount of money on, not plugging any specific names. We don't have beer on tap. We don't have ping pong tables. We don't really have much upholstered furniture because that's really expensive. We have perfectly functional furniture, and our co-founder, Caro London, is a designer and an architect. So she brings all of that experience to make a beautiful, functional, productive space. And it's really a productive space for the neighborhood is how we put it. For working, for playing, for partying, for meeting, for eating, for all sorts of things. But it's designed to be extremely flexible. And so for me, that low cost base is essential and very important, because it means we charge a low amount of money to be able to use that space. And in some ways, we also cross-subsidize the use of space so that it's free for very many uses and for different types of users. So our membership is not fixed. It's there's a different set of tiers, but the whole point is that we want to kind of flip, as many people are, the way that space can be used as a service for everybody in a neighborhood to be productive, put simply. And we do that by having low cost base, having a designer in-house who can make it be very functional, very productive, but without having extreme costs, and thinking very consciously about how we flex the space and how we target different users for that space. So I think that's probably me finished on what I was going to say, but it's, for me, co-working is a very powerful tool for smashing open the doors of spaces that have previously been seen as private and exclusive in a way that doesn't have to be exclusive in how it's set up. So co-working has been quite an expensive, exclusive thing for people who currently or before were trying to set up a business or trying to find somewhere to study or whatever. And now I think there are ways, ARC is proving that, and I think all my panelists next to me, using the power of Nexudus at ARC Club, for example, are finding ways to do that, that makes it much more inclusive, aspirational, lively for neighbourhoods. I think that's my piece.
That's amazing, Josie. Thank you very much. I've been to ARC Club a couple of times, and ARC Club is different. It's really embedded in the community. It's really part of the neighborhood, and it's not at all exclusive. It's a very inclusive place to be, and I think you've done an amazing job with it. It's very interesting to get those insights, really, as somebody who operates co-working spaces as well. I know everybody on the call will be thinking about the trials and tribulations of overcoming exactly those obstacles that you spoke about. So thank you very much. I'm going to leave the questions, which are coming out, I'm going to leave the questions to the end, go straight on to Monika. Monika, as you say, is working with you already as Nexudus is your provider. Monika's been working with us in Bohan as well, helping us to get sorted out with our space management system, and she's been an absolute tower of strength. So let me just thank you, Monika, before you even start, by on behalf of me and David, for all that you've done for us so far.
My pleasure.
Yeah, no, I mean it. And over to you. The spotlight is on you.
Fantastic. So, I want to just start where the Nexus is coming from, because Nexus just didn't came up there thinking there is a business opportunity out there. Like, our co-founders had a friend who was opening the co-working space, and at that point they did really fell in love with the concept. They really saw that at that point, which was like 10 years ago, so the co-working at that point was more educating the market what it exactly is. No one knew what co-working was at that point. They saw already the potential of it being the future of work, right? And at that point, no one believed that. At that point, no one really thought that we won't be going to the office like Monday to Friday. And we actually stopped going to the office at some point, which of course had a huge impact on the co-working spaces that were this as default collaboration spaces, but it also showed the power and strength of those businesses. Because now when we are actually exiting this time when we needed to be at home and we are coming back to the offices, you can see larger and larger corporations embracing this concept of flexible working. And that's something that Josie mentioned as well, in terms of them. It became a mainstream at this point. And I have here some notes as well, like, I don't know, recently, I'm sure everyone heard in the industry, but like GSA in US was the biggest employer in the US, employing more than 2 million employees, decided to invest huge amount of money to actually send their workforce to the co-working spaces. So it's really becoming a thing of those big corporates seeing that the co-working spaces is the future. But I think where the strength of the co-working spaces is essentially influencing those individuals and building the communities and impacting the local environments. I mean, here I have as well example of the melting pot, who's using Nexudus as well. They are actually a very social, conscious foundation that is basically helping local entrepreneurs to develop their businesses. And using our solution, they basically put together a social impact report that I recommend all of you checking out if you haven't. So it's called Social Impact Report 2018 that you can see on their website, it's public. And they basically asked exactly this, what Josie said, this what kind of impact they do on the lives of the individuals that are in their spaces. And from their report, you could see things like that they actually facilitate larger equality and inclusivity. So you could see, for example, from the members that they actually hosted in their spaces, 42% of businesses founders were actually women, which is like double the average of the UK at the time. You could see that members were clearly saying in this report that the being in the space, even like collaborating with other people, is reducing their self-isolation feeling, builds confidence, improves mental well-being, all of this that we really need right now, coming out of pandemic. So I feel that co-working will play a big role in that as well. And it's essentially leads to collaboration, inspiration, motivations, and higher impact on those businesses that are already there. 80% of the people who actually gave their opinion in the study said that they would rather collaborate with a member from their own community than go anywhere else. So by establishing those local co-working spaces, you make sure that those local communities feel heard, they feel understood, they have motivation to act. They are not left behind, right? Because they have the place to go and focus when not everyone is lucky enough to have their home office and have a balcony maybe or garden to relax. So they need to go somewhere where they will be productive. And the co-working spaces are actually making it happen. And the big part as well we need to look at is the future generations. I mean, as a software providers, obviously we provide some sort of tools that co-working spaces can facilitate, which is, as an example, facilitating this virtual community that you can nurture. Because let's be honest, your community is your biggest asset as a co-working space, right? And because we will have more and more those corporations potentially also coming to your workspaces, they will be there just few days a week, not all the time. So they won't have a dedicated desk. They will be coming every single day. And therefore, creating this virtual community, so connecting those members not only when they are physically in the space, but when they are remotely working from time to time and coming as well to your space, it's very important. I mean, we are rather from the millennials generations and earlier, but the newest generations that will be your customers as a co-working spaces, they actually are so, they are not much used to this face-to-face interaction, even before the pandemic, right? So they were born with their phones in hands. So therefore, by actually moving your community, not only within the moving your community a bit into the virtual world, you actually help them to blend in and to interact as well with your community. I mean, I think this younger generation has a bit of a problem approaching people directly when they actually are in the physical space, because you know, especially people from disadvantaged background, when they come in and they basically sit down there, it just feels so daunting to speak to people out of nowhere. So if you actually have a tool that will enable them to talk to people first virtually and then just meet with them after interacting first somewhere where it's their safe space, which is their, you know, using their mobile phone, using their social media, then when they come in, they feel like they are actually at home. So I think those were the main takeaways that I can think of, that basically you can facilitate those connections as a co-working space, not only physically, but you can have a larger impact if you actually do it as well a bit virtually and reach out to those communities that potentially, as Josie said as well, may not be that the typical co-working space customer, essentially.
Thank you, Monika. It's brilliant. You touched on a point that is absolutely vital, isn't it? About the facilitation and the bringing together of people. I mean, we're in the business of doing exactly that. And if we fail, then our co-working space is going to fail. It's just going to be dead, which is the last thing that we want. So thank you for raising those points. And I'm sure there'll be a couple of interesting questions to you as well at the end. Then we have Telixia Inico, who's a spoken word artist, public speaker, and founder of LDN Creates. Telixia, the floor is yours.
Hey guys. First off, thanks for having me, David. Truly appreciate being on this platform. So I guess what I wanted to kind of talk about in terms of co-working is bringing a light and shining that light on the fact that LDN Creates is a different type of co-working space. Is a different approach on what we believe co-working looks like from the creative industry side per se. So traditional co-working spaces have desks and meeting rooms, etc. However, with LDN Creates, we don't have any of that. What our space is more so a creative hub, and how we incorporate the element of co-working is that people can book the space, the different types of services within our space, and co-work together on projects. So within our space, we have a podcast space, we have a content creation studio, and we also have a music production studio and an event space. Now, one thing that I've found difficult, and a lot of people within the creative industry have found difficult, is networking. As Monika spoke about millennials finding it difficult to even go into a co-working space and approach somebody to speak to. So what we've done is we've been able to build our community around our passions and around the stuff that we're interested in and that we're working towards, in order to even start that conversation. Because we find that, you know, if somebody's interested in creating a podcast, we know that they're going to need a photographer. They can go upstairs and see someone that's shooting and form that bond and form that connection in terms of networking. So in terms of co-working, LDN Creates and myself has kind of tried to change that element of what traditional co-working would look like. Through our space, we've been able to work with entrepreneurs, because obviously, yes, entrepreneurs need a space to work. They need a desk. They need meeting rooms. However, they also need a place to create content for their business. They also need a place to be able to learn about how they're going to be able to do an advert in order for their business to be on the same level playing field as some of these big corporations. So that is how we have kind of changed the traditional aim of co-working and what that looks like for the creative industry. Not only that, I thought it was important for me to create a space like London Creates. One, because representation matters. Two, because lack of access. There's people from underrepresented communities that have no access to spaces like WeWork. They can't afford, when they're starting a business, to spend £250 on a membership, unfortunately. So it's about creating these opportunities. It might not be on a bigger scale, but on a smaller scale, in order to at least help them get their foot in the door, and build up the networks that they may need in order to push their brand or their business to the next level. But also give them a taste of what, co-working could look like. They might start with London Creates and then think, I need to be around a more of a professional environment where there are desks, where there are meeting rooms. I now know what to expect. I've now been able to save up a certain amount of money. I can now go and afford to buy a membership, at WeWork or at another co-working space that adds a bit more value. However, it's good that we have this element so we can start somewhere. We can provide that support for others that are starting at the bottom. So in terms of my contribution, that is the reason why, we created this type of co-working element, because like I said, representation matters, and we don't have any of that. So yeah, I guess like that's that's me in a nutshell, really.
That's awesome, Telixia. I mean, I'm dying to come and visit your place and meet some of your people.
Please.
And also when it comes to business development of creatives, and I'm sure Claire, who's speaking a bit later, who's really heavily into supporting young creatives with their business development as well. We in a business community can do a lot more, I think, to support these young people, to bring them on. We can be buying and selling from each other, and we can be giving everybody a lift. And I think channels that put people in touch with people, like yours, like ARC Club, I think are the part of that mix. Yeah, everybody, of course, wants to be rich and famous, and they want to have a larger audience. But while they're starting small, I think they need as much help as they can get.
Exactly.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much for that. Right. Now, so Claire, I have visited several times to the Not My Beautiful House, which is an extraordinary story, because you started with literally nothing and you managed to, within a short space of time, to crowdfund it, get it up and running, but also curate the exhibitions, as well as get the original artists to bring their content in to show it off, as well as get members of the public to come in there and single-handedly regenerate the high street. So well done, Claire. Over to you.
Yeah, I felt like a little bit of an imposter sort of saying that I was running a co-working space, because the house really isn't that, but I guess what it is a collaboration space. And what we did when we were setting it up very quickly, I think the turnaround was 6 weeks, we listened to the students that were working with us on the interiors and the design, the branding, and we weren't really hearing that they wanted co-working spaces. I think at the time, sort of March, April, a lot of people were still under lockdown, and we just thought there was too much risk involved with opening a co-working space. So what we did was open a shop, gallery, and exhibition space instead, and where a lot of people, a lot of artists, not just our students and graduates, were, as Josie was saying, lacking spaces to express themselves or showcase their work. And what we've done since May is sort of put on a really, I guess, flexible and agile display of work that we found by people either approaching us or us finding new artists locally via Instagram. In one case, me taking a photo of a graffiti artist's work down in Leek Street tunnels in Waterloo, and then him contacting me and saying, do you run Not My Beautiful House? And me saying yes, and then him coming to do a bespoke design on 4 of our walls, and then is now selling his artwork. So I would say it's all happened really flexibly and agile. sort of way, which has been very stressful, hence the grey hairs. But it's also really meant that the local public, young people, you know, the range of people that are visiting is so wide. It's something ridiculous, like from teenagers right up to 90-year-olds, and that's sort of reflected in the people who are selling their products in the store as well. So it really has sort of outperformed everything that we expected. And I think as soon as we stepped into the space, we knew that it probably wasn't suitable for a workspace. It was always part of the plan, but for whatever reasons, it's kind of not really been part of it. And I think now we're sort of, I hate to say returning to normal because it isn't really normal, but I think now students are coming back to campus and studios are opening again. They probably don't need a third space, although I still do like the idea of that kind of thing happening. I guess it's just, we've just tried to be led by students and people who have used the space and comments in the guest book and everything. So I guess the other thing that we didn't really anticipate was students' confidence after or coming out of the pandemic. So a lot of students we thought would apply to sell their work, which they have. We have hundreds of sellers. But I think people needed that sort of bit of persuasion to get their work out there. I'm thinking particularly of like an illustrator who was absolutely prolific on Instagram, but as soon as we said, can we sell some of your prints? Oh, me, no, that's not for me. I'm not good enough. So there was this extra sort of piece of work we had to do in terms of getting people's confidence up and letting them know that what they're doing is saleable and is interesting for people to buy. And I think you read out the stats at the beginning about the average spend. I still can't really believe that. I know I was just having a quick look at the figures before I came onto this, and I know that the footfall has decreased a little through August and September, but I guess a lot of people are on holiday. But for us now, the next big stage will be to see what happens before Christmas. We've just done 2 weirdly really successful pop-ups of a pop-up. I don't know what you call that. I don't know what the official term is for that, but we did a little pop-up in the Bentals in Kingston, and then we've just done a sort of freshers market on Old London Road as well. So it's kind of a movable feast. Once you've kind of got those established sellers in place, it's quite easy to sort of mix it up and remix it again and again. So I'm really excited to see what's going to happen in the next few months, because if you'd have said at the beginning of the year, this is all going to happen, I'd never have believed you. It's kind of one of those things. We've been really lucky with the funding, the support from the council, support from various stakeholders, and then just the support from the public coming into the shop and buying stuff, which is the basic thing. And the fact that people are interested in supporting young creatives is just so sort of heartwarming, particularly in a time like this when a lot of students, a lot of young people are sort of so pushed to kind of succeed and pass exams and pass degrees, where we're sort of trying to offer a space where they can try something out. And if it doesn't go quite as planned, it doesn't matter. There's no one going to tell anyone off. And I think when I started working on it with the student union, we sort of had this pact of, we'd been told no so many times before we even opened the doors, that we just never wanted to say no to anyone, no matter what idea they came to us with. So yeah, I blabbed on, sorry. I don't know if that made any sense.
It certainly did. I mean, can I ask you, Claire, what's the next step? Do you think you can keep this going? I mean, after the Meanwhile Space opportunity sort of goes away, I mean, are you going to be sort of reliant on Meanwhile Space and sort of rent-free? Or is there a scenario where you could end up paying a rent somewhere?
I guess maybe it depends who's interested. I mean, we were already meant to move out of that space at the end of August, and we got a little stay of execution, I think they call it. So the space, our kind of tenancy within that space, thank you very much to the landlord, is probably until January now. We've applied for more funding through the Art Fund, so we're waiting to hear back on that. If that doesn't work, we'll probably try some Arts Council funding. But it's sort of, I guess we want it to continue, And we've now got sort of the backing of the Business Improvement District, who are now leading an initiative to look at how many vacant shops there are and what can be done with them. So it has sort of definitely been a bit of a catalyst for change, particularly in Kingston and the wider boroughs. But we would really like to continue it. If we can't find another vacant shop, we'd probably continue it in some other way. I mean, we've shown we can do an outdoor market, so goodness knows what else we can do with very little resources anyway.
Right.
Online, you should go online.
We are online already. I think we managed to get the website up and running in, I guess, June. So yeah, you can buy most products online as well.
Okay.
So it is up and running.
There are a few questions in the Q&A, so I'm going to put those. Not surprisingly, they are about sort of a question about the sort of commercial scenarios and how to make things work. So I'll put the first two questions together. I wouldn't mind actually getting a response from both Josie and maybe Telixia as well, because I think you're probably in the situation. So, where you're looking for maximum value for a neighbourhood at low cost, how are you getting landlords to sign up to this? Don't they want to maximise their rent? Are you getting pushback from landlords? Is it a temporary thing, or is there a long-term solution to keep those rents affordable for people who are at risk of exclusion?
Telixia, go ahead first.
So I guess with London Creates and my experience, obviously, for those of you that don't know, I only built London Creates last September. I literally had an idea, like, I want to create a co-working space and creative hub, and built it in 4 weeks. I'm not from the co-working business. I just went out on a limb. So I had to literally go to a unit, an industrial unit, and find a vacant warehouse space and built what was needed. So in terms of rents and stuff, it's like, I was quite lucky to be able to have this space where the rents are quite low. So if I was then going to go to a high street, I probably wouldn't be able to afford to run a co-working space. You know what I mean? So I think it's extremely important to look at if I do want to build another space, it probably wouldn't be in the industrial, but I would probably look at going in with a bigger organization to see if we can purchase a building ourselves. Because I feel like in this industry, it's very important to have ownership of the building, because in case, COVID happens again, your landlord might want to sell and turn it into flats. We don't know. It's all about, if we want this industry to be long term and to have serious longevity, we need to look at, partnerships where we can own our building. So if COVID does happen or anything does happen, we can look at, we can rent this bit out, we can X, Y, and Z, because that's what our landlords are doing.
I think, firstly, I completely agree with Telixia's point around the longevity of the site. And I think it's just a very different model to a meanwhile site. So they're not one better than the other. I think it's just they're very different. And so for taking ARC's approach, we tend to we've got one up and running site, and we're negotiating on 2 further ones. And on all of them, we're taking 20 to 25 year leases with a friendly break for us after 5 years, but a tenant only one. But crucially, I think there's no silver bullet to the rent thing. But we take a clear approach in terms of our strategy anyway, is to take locations that are not commercial locations and not even actually high streets. They're off high street. They are either, if they're existing units that have been vacant for a number of years, then the landlord, it's like zero money or some money. So we give them a bit of money, and we commit to having a bit of money in their bank and also a great use for the space. So there's that model there, but then there's also future facing. We're talking, one of the negotiations we're doing now is in a unit that's yet to be completed. Now, in that instance, we are part of the bid, we are part of the strategy of the site, and it's a build to rent site. So you're looking at ARC as a core amenity in a development in a new neighbourhood or an additional development in an existing one. And so that for us is the longer term play for ARC. It's that we need to be positioned, and we are functionally an amenity for neighbourhoods that is affordable, accessible, is built to have a positive placemaking, if you want to use that term, effect in the place that it's in. And so in that sense, we are strategically partnering with landlords who have that progressive approach to their sites. It's still a commercial one. They're still looking at it as what rent they can get for the units, the residential units, by having these amenities. So it's still a commercial conversation, but for that strategic reason of placemaking and benefit to residents and the residents that already exist in the neighbourhood, they will pay, or they will let us pay slightly less below market rate, potentially. But frankly, it's about the location choice. That's the main point. And then the last point is that there are some tactical opportunities where they need to tick a few boxes for planning and for achieving certain elements of that planning. And we offer a return to them for achieving those, because we have impact baked into our model. And by impact, really, we mean accessibility to all in the neighbourhood to be productive in different ways. We can be an appealing thing for landlords from a planning and from getting developments off the ground perspective. Now, that's a longer term play. That's one of the negotiations we're doing now. But really, it's about choosing off beaten track locations, small units as well. We take very small units, 2,000 to 3,000 square foot. So where we can get a lot of bums on seats and make it a really thriving place. But it doesn't need to be a big floor plate for us.
Just based off of what Josie was saying as well, I think it's important that even with, the model that we do being quite different to the traditional co-working, I have to be very careful of the location, but then also of how we market it and the type of people we have come in, because of our services, we can quickly be labeled as a youth club. And we're not that, we are not that, yes, we have young creators, but we make sure we push out that narrative that you enter our space knowing that you're here to work, you're here to have tangible outcomes, and you're here to literally push your brand or your business to the next level, which then helps us be able to source locations, because, people don't really want youth clubs around. You have young people hanging around doing whatever. However, they are more open to having co-working spaces and creative hubs in the community.
Yeah. I've got two more questions before we wrap up. And the next question is for Monika. Monika, have you, within your network, come across like a hybrid model where you've got a co-working space operator like a WeWork or one of these big names, but within it there is a more shall we say socially inclusive hub where there is affordable space? In other words, where the commercial part is cross-subsidizing the affordable part. Have you come across that at all?
I think it's a very hard question, and from my perspective, from my experience, I haven't seen many of such cooperations of those big co-working spaces chain with the small operators. Rather, what I can see is cooperations of smaller providers together, and I think that's where you can go and bring value, because small operators tend to have 1, 2, 3 locations, very localized, and often their members may travel and may need the space around different areas of the city or in different cities in the country, etc. So this is where I have seen more cooperation going on, and it's quite often actually, where the, let's say, 3 location space is basically cooperating with another 3 location space, and they together offer some certain package or certain membership that allows people to be more mobile. So when they travel, they can basically have the space to sit down, have a meeting with other spaces. I think it's very hard to cooperate with those big real estate companies and those big players. They have their own focus on profit. I don't want to say that, but they are much more focused on profit rather than social impact. So if you want to find some partner, I would rather look at the local networks of smaller independent co-working spaces or sister spaces in other parts of the country, other parts of the city. So for example, like the creatives, I'm sure there are some other creative spaces there that may want to cooperate together basically and create some projects.
Okay, good advice. And a very last question to the other three panelists. There's a need for co-working, there's a need for creative space, affordable creative space. Who should be helping you guys out? You know, there's meant to be new funding, like for the green economy. There's funding for there's the shared prosperity fund, allegedly. There's high street recovery funds. There's the social value that can emerge out of certain public sector contracts, which could free up some space. You know, I mean, who would you point the finger at and say, look, help us?
I'm happy to go first, but Claire, please interrupt me if you have better answers, which I'm sure you do. I mean, I personally think, I don't think that grand about it. I really just think about you need a space and what are the main costs around having space, and it's business rates. It's all the taxes that come with having those spaces. So really it's planners and local councils, I think, on one side, and the landlords on the other. But that's a harder group to wrangle, I think. Whereas from a planning perspective, just as an example, this new Class E, which helps us a lot actually in terms of getting sites and getting leases agreed quicker, is maybe at talk of being pulled and going back to being more traditional use classes. There's stuff like that that just makes things more complicated than it needs to be. And then business rates makes it more expensive, where we're treated exactly the same as pure commercial operators. We're often competing on sites against chain cafes, chain gyms, chain people who've just got more money. Nothing against them, great businesses, half of them. But frankly, if we could get away with having friendlier use classes, friendlier tax systems for uses that are genuinely trying to change and future-proof neighbourhoods and space, I wouldn't point a finger, but I would go to them first, knowing how hard that is. And then secondly, I think having some sort of, and we would love to, when we've done more sites, we will absolutely share our learnings around how to negotiate with landlords, because that's another big area where if we can create a few interesting models that are partnership based rather than pure commercial tactical ones, that's another place I would go and fish for easier wins or longer term wins.
I'd agree with Josie. I think we were really lucky that we sort of had existing relationships with the Business Improvement District, the landlord and the council. But I'd like to see some real sort of change happening. And I don't know, just some sort of big corporates sort of looking at all these amazing examples and going, actually, I want to support that. We shouldn't really be relying on scraping together funding bids or, you know, trying to sell our souls to, you know, to get funding for this. It should be easy to come by, and there's plenty of big businesses out there that are looking for talent and innovation, and this is just a way of sort of, I guess, seeking out talent. But I think more and more increasingly, particularly over the last 18 months, people are finding it really difficult to think differently and think out of the box. But yeah, I think some sort of very clever corporates should be looking at it in the same way that, you know, people like McKinsey and Deloitte bought up some really sexy ad agencies and, you know, now have that as part of their offer and not just consultancy. Sort of that kind of model, but it's definitely ripe for some investment from a different sector, not WeWork. Not that I have anything against them, but.
Thank you. Telixia, last word to you.
I guess for me is that London Creates was self-funded, so and our model is not a model that would allow us to get like government funding or funding around for social enterprise and stuff like that. So I guess what we would need to connect with corporations. We would need to connect with investors, you know, to believe in what we're doing and say, actually, we can duplicate this here, in this country, in that country, in this area, and get that real support. Like I said, when I saw the unit, I went in and I negotiated with the landlord. However, that was my first experience, you know, so I'm still learning. This is still a journey, but definitely, yes, some investors, even just, you know, local authority where we decide to set up, not even saying, you know, give us money, but endorse us. Let people know, look, this is the go-to co-working space. This is the go-to creative hub. You know, let's network, let's connect the dots, because I think that's what we're missing. We're missing that network and having access to people who can make decisions and who can help us.
Absolutely. Yeah, we need to join the dots. Well, thank you, everybody. Let me just wrap up by thanking you on behalf of Bohan for participating. It's been a wonderful and enlightening afternoon. And thank you to people who are visiting, watching on playback. Monika mentioned a social impact report. There'll be a link in the description to that social impact report. Otherwise, I look forward to seeing you again on a future Bohan webinar. Thank you very much, everybody, and goodbye.